Hello, everyone. Tom Hall here, Executive Director of Montclair Film and the Montclair Film Festival. Thank you for sticking around after our screening of 1,000 Cuts for our Q&A with the director, Ramona Diaz. Ramona, hello.
Hey, Tom. It's good to be here. Wherever here is, it's good to be here.
We're trapped in these boxes together on Zoom. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us.
Of course.
I wanted to start by, you've become, I think, one of the quintessential sort of documentarians of the Philippines in the contemporary era. And I'm wondering if you could just take us back a little bit before we start talking about this film to your earlier work and sort of your decision with Imelda and other films that you've made to document the Philippines and the choice that you made to begin telling those stories. Obviously, there's your relationship to the country, but also to power. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about these relationships sort of off the top.
Yeah, Tom, it wasn't any conscious decision on my part to then start documenting these kinds of stories. It just sort of happened. Like in the beginning of my career, I started with Imelda because I got access to her, right? And I got access to her because I actually asked for a quick interview for my thesis film. I was in grad school then. And then she gave me access. She gave me like 15 minutes, which turned out to be 5 hours, right? And then which turned out to be a feature-length film. And so that started my career. And and then, of course, after that, I guess 1,000 Cuts is the 5th film now on the Filipino and the Filipino-American experience. It wasn't conscious decision, but then I realized I could tell those stories. I knew those stories really well. And there's something, I go between Manila and here, right? I go between the US and the Philippines. There's something to be said about living in this sort of liminal space. I'm 1 foot there and 1 foot here. And so I can be an observer in both places. And I think that's the best way to describe being a documentary filmmaker. You're always an observer. And I found I had access to certain people in the Philippines that I wanted to talk to in the guise of like making a film, right? So I found that. And then, so the career just rolled along. There wasn't any conscious decision until you look back and you're like, oh my God, yeah, I've been doing this thing. And people have started articulating it. And so then you pause, then you pause because then suddenly it's like the burden of representation. Am I getting it right? Or what is it that I need to get? Or do I just have to stay true to the thing that I want to say? And is that enough? So all those questions come in.
And I think that's a great follow-up question because, especially in the case of 1,000 Cuts, you have a subject who is very committed to being a journalist and telling the truth and speaking truth to power through facts and information. But nonfiction film is not news reportage. It is an artistic endeavor where a lot of subjective choices are made. And so you talked about that sort of burden of representation. On the one hand, there's sort of representing the Philippines, but on the other hand, there's representing your subjects in a very, I think, an even-handed and fair way without turning them into necessarily hagiography or these incredible critiques. You let them be themselves and see what comes of it. Can you talk about walking that tightrope? I think especially with Maria in this film, but also with Imelda and in all your other works as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a great question because this is a conversation actually that I've been having with Maria for the last 2 years because more than ever, I'm filming a journalist, right? So journalism comes into it. So I've had to really think about what is it I do that's different from journalism because I need to add to it, right? They do their things so well and I'm not a trained journalist. So I've been telling Maria, what I do is I film behavior. That's what I do. I film attitude. So even like an interview, it's not just an interview for fact's sake. Yeah, you're not getting like facts out of them. You're getting attitude. So how I film them is important. It's mostly wide. So I love body language. I love how like Patricia in A Thousand Cuts. She said, "Should I smoke?" No one ever lets me smoke in an interview. I'm like, "Of course you can smoke because it's her thing," and she doesn't light it until the very end. So I think that's the difference. That's the difference between reportage and what documentary filmmakers do. Most documentary filmmakers do, and I really, yes, I steer clear of hagiography because I don't think that adds anything to the discussion. I really love the complexity of the people I film, and I'm always aware of that. I need to get to the grace, right? It's black, white, but I love the gray area in between. Sort of, it's messier. It's sort of, but I have to make sense of the mess, which I love. That's what I love to do. I love to go in there and say, okay, what is this about? What's happening here? And then put it against a backdrop of something cinematic, like A Thousand Cuts, right? The midterm elections. I knew it's always spectacle in the Philippines during election time. So I try to do that so it's kinetic, so it moves forward. Yeah, but I just, the time the time spent with the participants in my film not shooting is to me as important as the time spent shooting. So even if we have an 8-hour day, if we don't do anything for 6 hours, but we get something great for 2 hours, it's enough. Like I can go to bed, I can sleep. But that was a hard lesson. I used to freak out more. I freak out less. I'm more like, okay, then something will happen. I trust the process more.
And you've also focused on the stories of women in the culture. Although in this film, the presence of this it's really juxtaposed with the presence of this very sort of macho Duterte regime, but also the local politicians and sort of the people who are running for Congress and all that stuff that are happening, like you mentioned, in the elections in the Philippines. What is it about Imelda, I think of Motherland, this film, as a woman that draws you to the stories of women?
Because I'm a woman. No, I think like from Imelda, my next film was The Learning, right? Which was about power and disempowerment. And I think that was a very conscious decision on my part because I looked at power and I wanted to look at the opposite, and that presented itself. And they happened to be women, but in The Learning, I wanted male teachers to be in it too. It's a story about teachers being recruited in the Philippines to teach in inner city Baltimore, and I followed their freshman year, teaching in America. It was a mix of females and males, but I found that I found the women to be more open about the process, less controlling of it, and that's why the male characters fell away because there was no time. I follow life unfolding, right? And they were the ones who kept me abreast of their lives. They were the ones who came around sooner and realized that theirs is an important story to tell. Because I don't think people, no matter how, except maybe for Imelda, okay, she was a special case, but most people don't really get why I want to film them. They never feel like the gaze, they're important enough for this unflinching gaze. They feel uncomfortable. It's like, my life is so ordinary. But then you come around, you turn a corner. And I think women turn a corner quicker for some reason. Even Arnel Pineda and the Journey film, it took a long time for him to realize that his was a special story. But it was obviously a special story, but it took just, it just takes longer, I think. So, with A Thousand Cuts, I'm so fascinated with General Bato. But it was also more, by the time I entered his life, he was going to run for senator. So he was more guarded by then. So, something happens. Things just fall away. But the next time, my next documentary, I think is going to be very, very male. I think.
That's exciting. Yeah. That's exciting for you. I don't know about your guy. That's great.
Right? We'll see. We'll talk in a couple of years, Tom.
Exactly. So let's speak about Maria for a few minutes. and her, difficult relationship with the Duterte regime, which has been well documented in, I think, the global press, from her Times Person of the Year award through, recent stories about her losing that, I guess it was a libel case over a insane technicality. She has been very, very consistent in her lack of fear of telling the truth. Now, one of the things I found interesting about this film is that you sort of got behind that a little bit. You got, and I mean, like underneath the facade of bravery, there's a very human story there. A person who's like deeply concerned about their society, who's trying to be objective, which is, as we all know, relatively impossible to do, and being constantly attacked by this strongman government. And I thought you did a really great job of bringing some vulnerability to her character, even though she is so straight ahead and such a true believer in her cause. Can you talk about trying to build that character through the footage that you got, and how you were able to bring sort of that balance to Maria's persona? Because for me, it was a new look at her as a person.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for saying that. It took a while. I think that happens during production. I'm very aware when I'm not piercing something. Even, I spend so much time with them, and I'm aware of what I'm getting on camera, and I'm aware what happens when the camera's turned on. And there's something, there's something performative that happens when the camera's turned on. But then I realized that she had this amazing relationship with her sisters. And with her sisters sort of, complimented her and made her more real. So I'm not sure if those are the scenes that you're talking about, but to me, they were really important because they were the key to Maria's vulnerabilities, and when it made her really more rounded out. So I think that happens during production. I'm very aware when I'm not getting through. So little details for me are important. When to sort of break, get a little bit, look a little bit underneath the hood, right? So like her, I don't know. To me, it's details like her leg hanging and she's like shaking it while she's looking at the calendar. To me, those are such important little details because then it rounds it out. It's like, oh, she's just hanging out and looking at her calendar, which is like a crazy calendar. But it's what we all do that, right? Okay, what is my schedule now? What is it? But it's like I also wanted to film her very casually, right? It was important for me. So she puts her feet up and all that. I think that was, and in the car, she was more relaxed, which was ironic because it was really the place where she was most vulnerable physically,
right? Because
she was out and about. But then she seemed more relaxed there. And I realized, because she's also more introspective. It's the only time she's alone, really, not even. So I chose key places and key details to at least unpack her a little bit. But she is, her public life really consumes her every moment, so she has to, she has to be brave. And, and it's real, Tom. It's not made up. It isn't. I spent so much time with her that you would think, right? She would, there'd be a little crack. But no, she is real. She believes so much in the mission of journalism to shine a light. She believes that it's not a cliche for her. That is her mission.
And so the scene where she's interviewing Duterte that's in the film, was that Rappler material? Were you on hand to shoot that? And can you talk a little bit about that shoot or that moment? Because that confrontation for me was chilling.
That is Rappler footage. So that happened before I started shooting 1,000 Cuts. That happened in 2015 and then 2016 when he became president. But that was key to my getting into Maria. Sorry. When I saw that footage, yes, it was chilling for me as well. That it made sense, right? It opened up this whole world of Maria to me. And I saw it There are clips of it on YouTube, but then I asked Rappler for the entirety of the film, of the interview, and they gave it to me, all of it, like even things that didn't end up, and that's what I actually used in the film, because the sort of friendly banter, which is so weird to me, but she goes after him like, you said you killed, right? Well, now you're gonna have to be the guardian of the Constitution. How are you gonna reconcile those two things? But to me that was key. When I saw it, it was so key. I said, okay, I really, she is now the center of the film, because that's what happens. Like, I had planned on having an ensemble cast with this film. I saw it as this sort of, I always say, Robert Altman-esque kind of film, where so many characters, and then there's Duterte, shortcuts, the Medfly, there's Duterte above. But she was slowly become the center of gravity as the film unfolded. And then when I saw that, I was certain she was the center of gravity. I knew it when I saw that those two interviews.
Yeah. And I think, living through a difficult populist moment, you mentioned having one foot in the Philippines and one foot in America, and yet here we are with two very, I'll say, complicated leaders of each country, just to be
kind,
to be a good person on that topic. We have two very complicated leaders, but there's something about Filipino populism that's much more, it felt in it, just knowing what I know about having read about the drug war, quote unquote, class oriented than America would ever admit to itself. We have a lot of people, I think, in the upper class, talking about the other classes, but we don't have a working class understanding the way I think this film represents the drug war in the Philippine populist movement. Can you shine a little bit of light for us on sort of your thinking about the differences between those two populist things, and how do you see like the First Amendment in this country and the way that quote unquote fake news is treated here versus the way Maria's been handled and manhandled basically in the Philippines?
To me, the major difference is the institutions are weaker in the Philippines, right? So when social media is weaponized like it's been in the Philippines, institutions buckle quicker, because the Marcos dictatorship they were there for 30 years, and we're only like sort of 40 years out of that, and it took all that time to build back the institutions of democracy. It took one man to like dismantle it in 4 or 5 years now, right? So then I realized, it's so weak. I think that's the main difference. So we can't afford weaponization of social media because this institution is so weak, and that's why it takes Maria to step up and say something, especially if you don't have a very strong opposition leader. We do not, and the Philippines does not have a strong opposition voice. And so she's become the opposition, which she's not comfortable with because she's a journalist. She was never meant to be the opposition voice. But I think that is the key difference. But nothing happens in the Philippines without the elite realizing and moving. You saw it in people power. The minute the upper class and the super elite realized that it was in their self-interest to go after to protest against the dictatorship, they did. We're not there yet in the Philippines. It's going to take a while. It took 14 years, during the Marcos regime. It's going to percolate because they're comfortable. The drug war numbers. And I just realized making this film that the drug war is not the same as the drug war here. So I really have to define that, right? The drug war there means you go out, you're caught, you can be killed and shot, and without any due process. That's really what it is. And there are many victims, like in the thousands. The government says it's what do they claim? Now it's 4,000, but human rights groups say it's way above 20,000, which are horrific numbers. 4,000 is a horrific number, and that's what they admit to. But people don't really. It's also very. It's such an abstract thing for a lot of people in the Philippines. And when they say, no, I feel safer in the streets because there's no drugs, people believe that narrative, and the government feeds that narrative as well. So suddenly you're all feeling safe until you're not safe because you're shot, which is crazy. So I think that's a difference. But Tom, like living here and living there and going back and forth, I've always known, it's been very clear to me how different the two places are. But when I wake up in this country and I turn on the television and CNN reporters are getting arrested on live TV, I really take a pause. I'm like, wait, where am I? I thought that was chilling to me. I said, what is happening? And the talk of like not leaving power and I not having this peaceful transition. I'm like, oh my God, that's what I grew up with. I was born and raised under martial law. And it feels like, wait, I trusted this place to be sane. I always say, like, I have an immigrant's belief in this country because I chose it. It better work, right? Of all the countries, I chose to live in this country. So I still, I don't know, maybe I'm naive. I still believe in it. I think something's gonna happen. Good. Good. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. Has this film impacted your ability to move freely back and forth?
We'll see. It hasn't been tested because I only hold a U.S. passport, and as you know, if you hold a U.S. passport, you're not allowed anywhere. So I haven't.
True.
Which is so ironic. Ironic. But and I don't have a dual citizenship. And then I'm like, why didn't I ever do that? I just didn't. So I haven't tested it just because of COVID. We'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
I have two more questions for you. First, if you can update us on Maria. I mentioned earlier in my question about the fact that she was recently convicted under a very ridiculous, almost ludicrous technicality for having someone edit an article and then having it grandfathered into some sort of libel law, as I understand it. What's going on with her, and are you guys still in touch and staying abreast?
Yes, we are very much in touch. She does a lot of, she's doing a lot of talkbacks for the film and all that. So I'm very much in touch with her. She is, there was a judgment on one of her 8 cases on cyber libel. And it's so interesting how you describe it, because that is the point of the government, right? They make it so, her case is so opaque that it's hard to describe, right? If she were accused of sedition, that's easy, right? Oh, sedition, she's going against the government. I get that, okay. I see why they're going after her. But her cases are like tax evasion, cyber libel. What the heck is that? It's all those things that you have to unpack. And pretty soon you lose the attention of people. And then it seeds doubt, right? It's like, tax evasion? Did she not pay her taxes? That's why, in a way, the government is, I hate to say this, really smart about the cases they have against her, because it's so opaque. It's so hard to explain. And there are 8 of them. It's insane. So she has a judgment. She can go to prison up to 6 years for cyber libel. As you said, it was a technicality. Basically, it's libel on the internet. And since Rappler is all in the internet, it's for an article that she did not even write and she did not even edit. She was found guilty, but Rappler was not, which is so interesting. And the person who actually wrote the article, who has since moved on, and he no longer even works for Rappler. So she is appealing that, and if she fails, she doesn't win that appeal, she can take it all the way to the Supreme Court. But so she's in the Philippines, she's out on bail. She's in lockdown like the rest of the country. The Philippines has one of the strictest lockdowns in the world because Duterte's response to COVID has been militaristic police response, like he responded to the drug war, right? So it's not a public health response. So there's curfew. Everyone has to stay home. If you're caught non-compliant without a mask or whatever, you're like arrested or, bad things. Really bad things can happen to you. So she's in strict lockdown. There are, as I said, 7 more cases that are breeding. So you have to think of it in terms of 3 buckets. her cases. That's how I think about it. It's easier for me. So cyber libel, which is libel on the internet, simplest way to describe it. Tax evasion, she didn't pay taxes on Rappler and her personal on Rappler's taxes, and what they call anti-dummy. Being Rappler is they're saying that Rappler is foreign owned, which is not true. So those are the three buckets of legal cases that spawn other cases. So that's why she has 8 and 4 or 5 different courts. It's insane, and they just keep throwing, cases at her. Yeah, but she's still speaking out. She, from her apartment in Manila, she hasn't shut up, which is amazing. The president gets up at night. He has this late night press conferences. I mean, late because he's a night person. So it's like it starts at 10 p.m. It goes to whatever midnight, and everyone stays up. And he usually he hasn't done it recently, but he used to call her out. It's like, Maria Ressa, you're still blah blah blah. We're gonna find something. We're compiling something. He would threaten her personally at these press conferences, which is so surreal. He has so many problems. He's threatening Maria Ressa personally. Yeah, but she's okay. And we're friends. Of all the people that I've filmed, I always say that she could have been a person I could have been friends with, even if I didn't film her. Of all the participants in my films.
So, final question for you. This film is the winner of this year's David Carr Award here at the festival for Truth in Nonfiction Filmmaking. We're so proud to be able to share it at the festival, and I want to thank you for that. What's next for the movie, and how can people recommend it to others and make sure that it's seen more broadly here in the United States?
So what's next for the film is we were in virtual cinema this summer, and that is continuing. So if you log on to 1000cuts.film, you can find links to different theaters in the country that are still that have participated in virtual cinema. So you can choose a theater you want to support and buy tickets from that theater. So we're doing that most of the fall and winter. I think we'll still be in virtual cinema in some form. And then there's going to be a broadcast in January on Frontline. It's before the inauguration. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
So great please watch it. Yeah, totally.
So everyone spread the word, find a virtual cinema. You found this one for us today. So spread the word. We'll look forward to the January release, and very much looking forward to your male-driven 2 years from now documentary when it's ready.
Yeah. And Tom, thank you for your support of this film. I really appreciate it. All the kind things you've said, and Montclair's support, and the award. Really, thank you. It's really been humbling. I really appreciate it. Absolutely deserved. It's a fantastic movie and very important film. We love your work. You always have a home here at Montclair for your films. So thank you again for sharing with us, and we look forward to what's next. Thanks, Ramona. Thanks, Tom. Bye.
Bye.